Imagine waking up on a beautiful Sunday morning in Jos North, feeling like it is going to be a great day. You see your friends, you talk to your neighbors, and you feel safe because this is your home. But what if a stranger was watching you from a distance, waiting for the perfect moment to change everything? In the community of Anguwan Rukuba, the youths were hardworking and full of life. They spent their days looking for ways to help their families and make their town better. They were the kind of people who would give you directions if you were lost, or share their food if you were hungry. On March 29, 2026, many of these young people started their day with big plans, never knowing that a group of men on a motorcycle were already planning to cause pain. Trust is a very important thing in a neighborhood, but that trust was about to be broken in a way that no one could have ever imagined. One of the residents of Anguwan Rukuba woke up early that Sunday. He moved through his house, getting ready for the evening. He planned to meet his friends near the junction, a place where everyone gathered to talk and laugh. This resident was a kind man who always looked out for others. He checked on his siblings and made sure his mother was okay before heading out. He didn't see anything unusual at first. The streets were busy and the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the buildings. He walked toward the Anguwan Rukuba junction, thinking about his work for the coming week. He was a person who believed in the goodness of people. He believed that if you worked hard and stayed out of trouble, you would be safe. But the world can be a very different place than we think it is. As he reached the junction, he saw other youths gathered there, just enjoying the cool evening air. They were talking about football, their dreams, and their future. It was a normal scene that had happened thousands of times before. While the youths in Jos North were enjoying their evening, another group of people were far away in the Kanam local government area, facing a very different kind of morning. These were the security personnel and local vigilantes who were part of a patrol team. These men were heroes in their community. They were fathers, sons, and brothers who had signed up to protect the rural areas from bad people. They knew the risks of their job, but they did it anyway because they cared about their neighbors. On that Friday afternoon, they were traveling in 2 vehicles toward the community of Wanka. They were checking the roads to make sure no one was being harmed. They were traveling through areas like Garga, Kyaram, and Jiambao. The team was led by 2 senior military officers who were very experienced. They were not looking for a fight, they were looking for peace. They wanted to make sure the farmers could walk their land without being afraid of being abducted or losing their cattle. They were the shield for the people, and they took that job very seriously. However, as the patrol team drove toward Wanka at about 2 p.m., they did not know that hundreds of heavily armed bandits were hiding in the bushes. These bandits had a plan to end the lives of anyone who stood in their way. The security team was driving at a steady pace, looking at the trees and the road ahead. They didn't see the ambush until it was too late. Suddenly, the air was filled with loud bangs and shouting. The bandits started shooting from every direction. The security men and vigilantes tried to protect themselves, but there were too many attackers. In the middle of this chaos, 12 security personnel and 8 vigilantes lost their lives. They were unalived while trying to do something good. It was a massive betrayal of the peace they were trying to build. This event happened just weeks before the shooting in Jos North, showing that the danger was spreading across the state. It started as a normal morning for these brave men, but it ended in a tragedy that the Kanam Development Association would later call deeply painful and unacceptable. As the sun began to hide behind the horizon in Jos North, the youths at the Anguwan Rukuba junction were still talking. They felt a false sense of security because they were in a crowded place. They didn't know that a motorcycle was approaching with 2 men who were not there to talk. These men had weapons hidden, and they were looking for a target. The attackers rode past the junction once, looking at the crowd. They saw the young people laughing and standing together. To the attackers, these weren't people with families, they were just targets. They turned the motorcycle around and came back. This time, they didn't just ride past. They slowed down and started shooting sporadically. This means they were shooting at anyone and everyone. The sound was like firecrackers, but much louder and much more dangerous. People started running in every direction, screaming for help. The attackers didn't care who they hit. They were there to end the lives of as many people as possible before speeding away into the dark. In that moment of chaos, the community was changed forever. The youths who were just standing there a minute ago were now lying on the ground. Some were trying to crawl away, while others were calling out for their friends. The attackers on the motorcycle didn't stop to see the damage they had done. They just kept going, leaving the community in a state of shock. This was the ultimate betrayal, because these youths were in their own neighborhood, a place where they should have been safe. They weren't doing anything wrong, they were just living their lives. The resident who spoke to the news later said it happened so fast that no one had time to react. One minute it was a quiet Sunday evening, and the next minute it was a scene of horror. The unidentified gunmen used the motorcycle to get close and get away quickly, showing that they had planned this attack to be as cruel as possible. Before we continue with this intense story, I want to ask you to please subscribe to Trem Crime Zone. We tell these stories because it is important to remember the victims and stay aware of what is happening in our world. By subscribing, you help us grow so we can continue to bring you the truth about these real-life events. We want to make sure these stories are never forgotten, and your support makes that possible. Click the subscribe button and the bell icon right now so you never miss an update from the Trem Crime Zone. After the shooting, the atmosphere in Anguwan Rukuba turned from fear to anger. The remains of the victims were still there when the local youths decided they had seen enough. They began to block the major roads with stones and wood. They were shouting for justice. They wanted to know why this was happening in their town. The tension was rising higher and higher. People were afraid that more fighting would start. The police were called, but for a long time no one answered. Commissioner of Police Basi Iwa and the other officers were not responding to the calls. This made the people even more upset. They felt like they were alone and that no one was coming to help them. They had been abducted by fear and they didn't know how to get out of it. The betrayal wasn't just from the gunmen, it felt like a betrayal from the people who were supposed to keep them safe. The road stayed blocked for hours as the community waited for answers that didn't seem to be coming. Meanwhile, back in the Kanam area, the bandits who had attacked the patrol team were moving into the Kyaram community. They didn't just end the lives of the security officers, they wanted to take everything from the villagers too. They stormed into the houses and took property worth millions of naira. They even rustled a large number of cattle, which is how many people in that area make their living. By taking the cattle, the bandits were taking away the villagers' ability to feed their families. It was another level of betrayal. The villagers had trusted that the patrol team would protect them, but now that the team was gone, they were defenseless. The bandits moved through the village like they owned it, taking whatever they wanted and hurting anyone who tried to stop them. This shows that the crime wasn't just about the shooting, it was about destroying the entire way of life for the people of Plateau State.
The morning after the attacks, families in both Jos North and Kanam began a desperate search for their loved ones. In Jos North, parents were running to the hospitals and the police stations, hoping to find that their children were still alive. They were looking for any sign of hope. Some found their children in the hospital, but others found only the remains of those they loved. The grief was so heavy that you could feel it in the air. People were crying in the streets, and the roads were still blocked by the angry youths. Everyone was asking the same question: who did this? They wanted to find the men on the motorcycle. They started looking for any evidence, like shell casings from the bullets or witnesses who might have seen the faces of the attackers. But because the attackers wore masks or moved so quickly, it was very hard to find them. The search for justice was going to be long and difficult. In the Kanam local government area, the Kanam Development Association, KADA, took the lead in the search for answers. They released a statement signed by their secretary, N.D. Shehu Kanam, and chairman, Garga G. Aliyu. They wanted the whole world to know what had happened to their 20 heroes. They described the deaths as unacceptable. They began to look at the history of the attacks in their area. They realized that this wasn't just one bad day, it was a pattern. For the past 3 or 4 years, the borders of Plateau, Taraba, and Bauchi states had been under attack. The search for the bandits led them to realize that these groups were hiding in the forests and moving between states to avoid being caught. They weren't just random people, they were organized criminals who knew exactly when the patrol team would be on the road. The search for justice was going to be long and difficult. As we look at the evidence found in these cases, please take a moment to write something down in the comment section. Tell us one thing you remember from the story so far, or perhaps a message of support for the families in Plateau State. Your comments help other people find this video so they can learn the truth too. As the police finally began to respond, they started to gather evidence from the scene at Anguwan Rukuba junction. They talked to the person who called the news and other witnesses who were there during the shooting. They were looking for any small detail that could lead them to the motorcycle or the gunmen. Sometimes, even a small piece of clothing or a specific sound can help the police find a criminal. They also checked if there were any cameras nearby, though in many parts of Jos, cameras are rare. The search was a race against time because the longer the killers were free, the more likely they were to attack again. The police promised to find the people who ended the lives of the youths, but the community was skeptical. They had heard these promises before, and yet the attacks kept happening. The search for evidence was not just about finding the killers, it was about proving that the law still mattered in Plateau State. The search also revealed the extent of the damage in the Kanam area. The Kanam group found that the bandits had moved through several communities like Garga, Kyaram, and Gyambao. They spoke to the villagers who had lost their cattle and their money. These people were now living in fear, wondering if the bandits would come back tonight. The search for safety became the most important thing for the survivors. They started forming their own small groups to watch the roads at night. They didn't want to be caught off guard again. They were looking for a way to protect themselves since the patrol team was no longer there. The evidence of the attack was everywhere: broken doors, empty barns, and the sad faces of the people who had lost everything. The search for justice was now a search for survival, as the people realized they were living in a war zone that no one seemed to be talking about on the news. The aftermath of these attacks left Plateau State in a very dark place. In the weeks following the shooting at Anguwan Rukuba and the ambush in Wanka, the community began to bury their dead. The funerals were large and filled with people who were both sad and angry. The remains of the 20 security personnel and the youths from Jos North were laid to rest, but the pain did not go away. For the families, life would never be the same. They had lost their providers and their protectors. However, the story does not end with just sadness. The outcry from the public finally forced the authorities to take action. More security forces were sent to the border regions, and the police began a more serious investigation into the unidentified gunmen on motorcycles. While it is often hard to catch these groups in the middle of a forest, the pressure from the Kanam Development Association ensured that the government could not ignore the problem any longer. The search for justice in these cases often comes slowly. Sometimes it takes months or even years to find the people responsible for such terrible crimes. But the aftermath showed something important: the strength of the community. Even though they were afraid, the people of Plateau State did not give up. They continued to speak out, and they continued to demand that their lives be protected. The double life of the bandits, where they pretend to be normal people during the day and become killers at night, was starting to be uncovered as more people came forward with information. The court of public opinion had already found them guilty, and the pressure was on the legal system to finish the job. The takeaway from this entire event is that we must value the lives of those who protect us. The 12 security personnel and 8 vigilantes died as heroes, and their names should be remembered as men who stood up against evil when no one else would. The closing message for the families of the victims is one of hope and strength. Even though your loved ones are gone, their bravery has shone a light on a very dark situation. Because of what happened to them, more people are now aware of the danger in Plateau State, and more steps are being taken to fix it. The lesson for all of us is that we cannot take our safety for granted. We must look out for our neighbors and support the people who work hard to keep us safe every day. Whether it is a youth at a junction in Jos or a soldier on a patrol in Wanka, every life is precious. We must continue to ask for justice and never stop telling these stories. If we stop talking about it, the bad people win. But as long as we keep the memory of the victims alive, there is a chance for a better and safer future for everyone in Nigeria. Thank you for staying with us through this difficult story on Trem Crime Zone. It is not easy to hear about such events, but it is necessary to understand the world we live in. We hope this story has given you something to think about regarding trust and the value of human life. Before you go, we have one final question for you to answer in the comments. Do you think that more should be done to support the families of the vigilantes who lose their lives while protecting their towns? Let us know your thoughts below. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends so they can stay informed too. We will see you in the next video with another real-life story. Stay safe out there.